Welcome once again to JewCast IRL. I am Andrew Meyer, along with Mark Lobliner and Alan Roberts. But most importantly, we're going to get right into it today. We have the esteemed, the legendary Jason Whitlock. Jason, welcome to JewCast.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
I got so many questions for you. I just want to jump into it. First, you broke the story of Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, backing Stephen A. Smith for president. And I've been saying for a while now, people are underestimating Stephen A. Smith. He's very charismatic, and in a debate, he could really do damage. How did you see it coming that Bob Iger was pushing Stephen A. Smith for president?
Well, I'll start with I don't think he'll be any good in debates. So we disagree there. But 2 years ago, Stephen A let it slip some sort of out of his mouth attack on me. And I was like, oh, okay. That's interesting. And Stephen A had this uh, autobiography he had written of himself, a memoir. And it had come out in hardback, let's say 3 years ago. Uh, I read it 2 years ago when it came out in paperback, and I was like, "Holy cow! There's a lie. There's another lie. There's a lie. Lie, 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 lie." And then I got done reading, and I was like, "Hold on, this memoir. I think it's called Straight Shooter, a memoir of first takes and second chances." And I go, "He's touching on all the political themes that would make him a perfect candidate to be a Democratic presidential candidate." And so I read the book and I'm like, man, this is like Obama's book. And it's filled with fantasies and narrative lies and all this. And I go, oh, now I understand why he goes on Fox News and pretends that he and Sean Hannity are best friends. Stephen A wants to be president, or someone has told Stephen A, we're going to run you as a presidential candidate. And then, you start thinking, well, what powerful people would perhaps position Stephen A as a presidential candidate? And I don't know if it gets much more powerful than Disney and Bob Iger. And it just all kind of made sense to me. And so 2 years ago, I started saying, hey, this guy's running for president. And no one took me seriously, and people laughed and thought it was stupid. But it was clear as day to me then.
Yeah, I think it's
Wow.
very I think it's been very obvious for a few months now, maybe 6 months, but that's incredibly early that you saw it 2 years ago. And he's saying things his script writers are very good. He's saying things that middle of the road people agree with. He was questioning January 6th and the government's involvement. So, you can say he won't be good in debate, but I'll tell you this, the guy gets paid millions of bucks from ESPN not because he's a stiff, but because he's got some energy. And go ahead.
He has energy, Andrew, but he has no substance. And I'm not saying politics at this point requires substance. Kamala Harris ran for president, got 70, 75 million people to vote for her. Joe Biden allegedly got 81 million people to vote for. You don't need substance. But uh, why he sounds good at the moment and why he sounds smart is because he's facing no resistance. I'll give you a sports analogy. Looks like everybody here has played some level of sports. And so he's running the three-man weave. And there's no defense in basketball when you're running the three-man weave in practice. He's playing 7-on-7 football in the summer with no pads on. There's no tackling. And so he gets on interviews and no one questions anything. He'll say the most ridiculous things, and he's been allowed to do this. He's sat in front of other podcasters and told stories. Oh yeah, when I was growing up in Queens, the drug dealers told everybody not to touch Stephen A. Smith, and he's talking about when he's 6, 7 years old, and that the drug dealers are warning everybody that kid's going to be something great. There's a hands-off policy. Don't touch. And I'm like, now I'm not from Queens. I'm not from New York, but I've spent some time in the hood, and I've known people that dealt drugs, and I'm a little bit up to date on it. I got family members that have done time for dealing drugs and all of that, and I'm just like, They don't see some little 6, 7, 8-year-old retarded kid and say, "Hey, don't touch, but he's going to be special one day." That's just not how it happens. And
No.
so when I see him on with Sean Hannity, or I see him interviewed with, I think, Megyn Kelly or whatever, it's just softball after softball after softball. He'll say something that someone like me would be like, "Well, hold on, man. You got to explain it." And so we can just dumb it all the way down to, let's remove the politics. The interviews he's been doing for years, I've seen him unpack I got a basketball scholarship because I hit 17 straight 3-pointers in a scrimmage game that I went up there, and Big House Gaines offered me a scholarship on the spot. I played Division I college athletics. I was a scholarship athlete at Ball State University. All of my friends either got football or basketball scholarships. I'm like, hey, that ain't the way it works. And
Nope.
You got to explain that to me, Stephen A. Kevin Durant and LeBron James ain't hitting 17 straight, and you're not getting, at a little poor HBCU, you're not getting a scholarship on the spot. They don't have that kind of money. They can't do that. You can't try out on the team, because he's saying this happened at the end of February in 1988 or 1989. I'm like, they're still in their season. Their season's still going on, and this guy's telling people he's at a scrimmage on a Sunday the day after they played a Saturday game. It just doesn't add up. He's facing no resistance. And so it's like a man going to a whorehouse and coming out and bragging about how many times he got laid. Well,
it still counts. Wait, it still counts though, right? It still counts. Though, right?
I guess statistically. So I listen through all this drama. I watch you religiously every day. I remember you doing a piece on his didn't he score like 1.5 points in college basketball or some crazy stat like that?
That's what he had been claiming. Yeah.
Is there a 1.5 pointer? I haven't watched basketball in a while.